All right, let's take a quick look at what Aembit's comprehensive workload IAM across Microsoft environments actually means before we get into the demo. So what I'm showing here is a distributed application. You're going to see that there are parts of it that are on-prem, and then there are other parts of it that are in Microsoft Azure. But really, these services can live everywhere. The application itself is a distributed application, but it might be making calls outside of the Microsoft environment. So what does Aembit actually provide that makes this happen? So first, it's the Aembit Edge for Windows. We supported Aembit Edge on Linux, in Kubernetes. We support it for various functions like AWS Lambda or Azure functions. Now we have the Aembit Edge, both proxy and controller, that runs on Windows servers, either physical servers or virtual machines. We also provide CrowdStrike conditional access now for Windows servers, so we can get things like the state of the server and a lot more information to ensure that the system is compliant and that we should allow the access policies for workloads to actually go through. Next, we have trust providers for both on-prem and in the cloud. For on-prem, we're using Kerberos. So Aembit actually goes and talks to Kerberos and says, hey, do you know this Windows server that's on-prem that's trying to talk to this workload? In the cloud, we actually look at Azure Metadata Service to learn more about the system before we allow any workload connections to happen. In terms of trust providers, we support a whole bunch of them on-prem. These could be things like, your static username and passwords, API keys, and a bunch of other types of credentials. For the cloud, we support the same ones, plus we also support Azure Entra, Workload Identity Federation. So if you're using service accounts and identity federation in the cloud, you can continue to use those to give credentials and access to any Microsoft Azure service. Now let's talk about the actual services themselves. In terms of server workloads, on-prem, we support a whole bunch of them. Anything from HTTP to SQL protocol to PostgreSQL and so on. In the cloud, we can support any type of service that runs in Azure. What this means ultimately is we can verify your Windows server. We can check the state that it's in, make sure that we're doing third-party cryptographic verification of all this information. We're getting various types of credentials, either static, long-lived, or just-in-time, short-lived tokens using WIFF. And then we can give you workload access to many, many different types of protocols and many different types of services, either on-prem, in Microsoft Azure, or externally. Now let's take a quick look at how this works in a demo. The Windows server that I'm running is actually running in AWS. You can see here that I'm connected to compute at Amazon AWS. So I'm going to go ahead and run this command. And what this command is actually going to do is I'm going to call Microsoft Graph to get back user information. But as you can see, I don't have any authentication here. And we'll take a look at how this all works. So I'm going to go ahead and run the command. And this gets me my list of all my users that are in AWS. Now let's switch over to the Aembit Cloud Console and look at how this all works. All right, here in Aembit, the first thing we're going to look at is the Edge components and what we have configured in terms of agent controller. You can see here that I have a Windows server running in AWS, and the status is green. This thing is up and running. Now let's look at the policy. So this is the policy that's running. What I have here is the Windows server. I'm doing my attestation using the AWS metadata service. So here we give it some information about the host name, but I also talk to my cloud provider to verify the host name. I could do this using an on-prem Windows server and check with Kerberos, or I can have the Windows server running locally in Azure and use the Azure metadata service. But I wanted to show that, hey, I can go cross clouds and work with something that's in Azure. The service that I'm connecting to is Microsoft Graph, which is in Azure. You can see here is graph.microsoft.com. And the way that I'm doing the authentication in terms of credentials, I'm not using anything static. What I am using is Microsoft WIFF. And the way I'm doing it is I'm getting a short-lived token. It's an OAuth 2.0 client token. And I have a bunch of other things configured in Azure so that that token is associated just with Microsoft Graph. So I make my call from a Windows server accessing a cloud service in Microsoft, and everything works fine. I get all the information I need. I could be on-prem doing the same thing to connecting to a SQL database on-prem. I could be on-prem and going to the cloud, Azure. I could be on-prem from a Windows server connecting to some outside service, or I could be on a Windows server in a whole nother cloud service provider and still connect into something in Azure. So this is kind of a comprehensive workload IAM for all things Windows, regardless of where the Windows server or the application live. And really, as long as I have the server workloads and the credential providers configured, it can really access a whole bunch of different things. Anywhere, doesn't matter where they live. Thank you.